Please note that though this is a spoiler-free review of the subject, I do spoil the series and or franchise leading up to this particular entry. I either have or will cover other parts of this franchise, and this video either is or will be linked below. I'm not going to restate here what I did or will say in the other video. These videos get long enough as it is. Put off by how long this video is, don't worry, I try to jam-pack my videos with as much content and as much detail as I possibly can. Anything I feel I can comment on and that I feel you might be interested in, I pretty much put in the video. I try not to repeat myself and talk fairly fast. Wonder Woman in 3D movie review. If I stand awkwardly in this video, it's because I have some back issues. I'm still trying to figure out a good way to stand. It doesn't cause problems. Starting with plot. American pilot Steve Trevor crashes on the island of Themyscira and tells Diana Prince about World War I, and so she leaves her home, the island, to try to stop the war. And, you know, Themyscira looks bright, beautiful, natural, unlike anything else in the DCEU, and a true paradise. And the trailers don't quite show how vast and epic it looks, which I was a little worried that it would look less like a world unto itself and more like a nice island to vacation on or something. And no, they really pull it off. You believe, you know, it's not the Thor one, you know, pipe organ opera set. It looks like people could actually live here, and it, you know, in the trailers you really just see some of the big nature areas. They also have this sort of village or possibly even town. You know, you don't see that much of it, but yeah, you believe that people live here. So yeah. And on the other hand, World War I era London looks more dreary, making a good contrast between the two settings. And yeah, it also looks more like the rest of the DCEU, which it helps. I mean, it's, for one thing, it's just really nice to not have all this dreariness all the time in the DCEU, but it's also, you know, the movie over and over says Diana is better than the war waging, you know, and it's not that the movie necessarily truly believes that, but characters keep bringing it up and arguing it, and you know, I find it's very satisfying the way the movie, where the movie lands on the issue. But the point being, it is saying that Diana is not like the other, you know. To be fair, you know, the Man of Steel, it's this to an extent as well. I just not sure it didn't work as well there, and I really wanted it to. I liked the approach, some of the approach of Man of Steel. I like trying to make Superman more grounded and less of just the perfect Boy Scout. I think that could be interesting, and I think this movie does a better job of just in this movie and in the comics, Wonder Woman is this ideal, but in this movie, she is this ideal, but the world isn't quite... her idealism doesn't fit in with the rest of the world, where in the comics, it wasn't just that she was this ideal. There were also, obviously there were the bad guys, but then the other good guys were also fairly ideal people. And yeah, in this, it really does feel like they plug. I mean, say what you will about the human nature. If you know just a little bit about what World War I was like, yeah, you and I can agree that that really represented some of the worst of human nature, and that's where the movie goes in and takes this, it takes this character, this mythological character who's very ideal, and puts her into a real world setting which is horrible, and tries to sort of, yeah, just let's see what happens. Let's see how the two affect each other. And the all-women island is peaceful even during a time where the rest of the world of man, is at war. And unlike Metropolis and Gotham, Themyscira is actually not right next to the closest human area. In the comics, it's in the midst of a vast ocean. I wasn't entirely certain how far away from other stuff it was, but certainly Steve manages to fly there in spite of the some injuries to the plane, and other soldiers manage to follow him there. So it's not hugely, excuse me, away, but at the same time, it most definitely couldn't possibly be all that close, because otherwise people would constantly be getting to Themyscira, and it's not... I was wondering if they were gonna have like some kind of Men in Black kind of thing, where like someone crosses over and they capture them, trying to figure out, okay, would you be dangerous to us if we let you go? And okay, obviously not, so just gonna fry your short-term memory and send you back. But they do, it's not the first time it's ever happened, and they don't... yeah, it's I will say, I do feel like, I don't know, maybe that's the idea. It felt like it came completely out of nowhere for them, when World War I was not some... especially when this movie is set, this is not right after World War I just broke out, and that didn't just... it wasn't like, lightning from a... there was saber rattling, there was, yeah, but the Amazons don't seem to know about it. They weren't prepared for soldiers to, get to Themyscira. And again, Themyscira, it's not something you just find, but you can accidentally get to it, evidently. There's not like some kind of video game like invisible border between the world of man and Themyscira. So yeah, the fact that they haven't been watching, they haven't been paying attention to what's going on in the world of man. They don't know about this huge war. But then that's kind of the point, isn't it? They're almost too peace, yeah, too convinced that war couldn't possibly be, yeah, they've cut themselves off too much from the human world, and it's by accident that Steve gets there. And yeah, it really, they need, the world of man needs someone like Diana Prince, and they could definitely have been much more prepared for men to cross the border. And they don't have someone watching. It's by accident that Diana spots Steve, and then the whole, yeah, so, and they're really not prepared for guns and such. But then that's also, I'll get more into that. But yeah, it does, it's not just this, oh, but they live in, just, they're not perfect. they they've cut themselves off from the world of man too much, so, and it means that they actually, yeah, they abhor war so much that they didn't pay close enough attention. They didn't realize that there was going to be this war, and that it might be necessary for them to go in and stop it. Now, and Diana sees his plane crash, and other than briefly pausing for the camera to do the quick turn around, other than that, doesn't hesitate to leap into the water to save him. This is the future the liberals want. So in the film WW1, WW fights WW1, if this becomes a pattern, I guess by the third film, which I do hope we'll get, she'll be fighting the Third World War. I could get behind that. And I have watched every DCEU movie, as well as every other live-action from 1978 onwards Superman and Batman film, except for Suicide Squad. The library won't let me have a DVD yet. They only have so many copies, and I've been on the list for months now. I should be getting it fairly soon, like within a few months or something, but yeah. Anyway, it's actually been far easier for me to get to watch Batman v Superman through the library. Anyway, other than Suicide Squad, at least twice each. And the only Zack Snyder film I haven't watched at all is Legend of the Guardians, The Owls of Ga'Hoole, which I will probably watch in video review just to have watched them all. And I have only watched the theatrical versions of his films, except for Dawn of the Dead, and Sucker Punch I've only watched once. And I rewatched a number of related and similar films in tone style, strong directed films, etc. Monster, which I watched the day after watching Summer of 4 Feet 2, the Simpsons episode where Christina Ricci plays the 8-year-old Erin, I want to say her name is, that becomes friends with Lisa. Talk about whiplash. Let's just say the two performances differ. Nobody forced me to. Also rewatched Boys Don't Cry, Punisher Warzone. I have watched Green Street Hooligans, but only once, and not recently. The Dark Knight Trilogy, Dawn of the Dead, Man of Steel, Watchmen, 300, and 302, Rise of an Empire movie, which doesn't have an empire, does have an empire, but not its rising, does have the 300, doesn't have the 300, but is a piece of number 2. Just kidding. I enjoyed that movie while realizing it's nowhere near the amazing film the first one is, for reasons I go into in the videos I did on the two films. And finally, last and definitely least, Batman v Superman. It's even worse on subsequent viewings. You forget just how the Jesse Eisenberg performance. I said originally that it might get praise, and that because it has passion, but it's just so screamingly cringe-inducing. Just, yeah. And the music, especially the Lex Luthor theme or whatever. Anyway, and I've now been able to watch Doctor Strange a second time. Now, a film version of Wonder Woman has been in development in some form since 1996, so this film could easily have come out before the DCEU, and then it might not have been a part of it, since it could very easily have been botched. And now it looks like it'll save it. and my deepest condolences to Zack Snyder and his family. And several times Steve will say, we can't do that, and Diana will do it anyway because she knows it's the right thing, and she can actually do it. Now, the ending is bad. It's... once you realize what's going to happen, you're like, oh, no, that's not good. They're not going to... oh, no. And it just... yeah, it was a really bad idea, but you can see how they ended up there. And it's not as bad as some of the other... I mean, okay, let's see. This is the 4th film of the DCU. First, second, and the 3rd. It's not as bad of an ending as the first 3 DCU movies have. Now, some people are giving this like a 1 or a 0, and some are giving it like a 10 out of 10 or something. Both of those are just too extreme. Personally, I'd say it probably lands at a 7, very close to an 8, but not quite there. What the movie does right, it does amazing, but there are just a little too... there are too many little things that are just... that pull it down. But I would definitely say anyone who votes less than a 6 or more than a 9, they're probably more voting for the movie that they wished they had got, or that they thought that they would get, or the like. That's just not... if it... yeah. Or like they walked into it thinking, you know, and yeah, they came out thinking that was not about Wonder Years at all. What went wrong here? Just if you at all knew what the basic core idea of the movie would be, and you know, yeah, also like if you were just thought up yesterday from 1985, and the first thing you do at all is walk into this movie theater and watch this movie, yeah, then you're not gonna like it. But given what movies look like and sound like today, and there's not an excuse, but I'm not trying to make excuses for it. Yeah, if you don't like what movies look and sound like today, then no. But Patty Jenkins manages to successfully position it so just to you know, she manages to push it as far away from the awful of the of the worst of comic book movie tropes and such, and while keeping it within the overall, you know, it is a big blockbuster comic book movie adaptation, but it's... and yeah, it looks and sounds like movies do today, but it's yeah, there are things that are so much better than... yeah. Now, I've watched the Film Brain Linkara Nash review of the unaired TV pilot for the new show, but I haven't watched any film or animated adaptations of Wonder Woman. I only know what I've read of JLA and Wonder Woman comics. And, you know, right from the first pieces of information I heard about this movie in particular, right away it looked like it would actually be good. You know, and I maintain there are good things. There are good things in the first 3 DCEU movies. It's just that the end result, when you put together all the elements, yeah, you end up with bad movies. And again, there's a lot I love about Man of Steel. I love Henry Cavill as Superman. I can't wait to see more of it. And there's a lot I love about Suicide Squad. I really feel like they got a lot right of the comic, and it's David Ayer. If it had been the first movie by David Ayer I had watched, rather than Street Kings being the first, it would have had a very similar effect. I would have been like, I need to watch more by this guy. But yeah, where it comes down, this is a great film, and I think anyone who says that it isn't a great film, they're just, whether they're saying it's an amazing and flawless film, or, well, amazing but not flawless, or they're saying that it's complete garbage, that's just out of proportion. I would say, and I've seen some say that it's like the best DC movie since The Dark Knight. I no, I would not go that far, but it is, and yeah, I've already mentioned it's better than the rest of the, excuse me, DCEU, but that's not saying much. I, if absolutely nothing else, the first three DCEU movies all have significant problems. No matter how you watch them, you have to admit, realistically, they are troubled films. They have issues, and this one does not have any big issues. There are perhaps the biggest problems with it are some kind of tonal inconsistencies, pacing issues, it looking way too much like Captain America 1, and to an extent also Thor 1 with some Thor 2. Ultimately, it doesn't really have any truly big problems that really, like, yeah. Now, but yeah, you know, great film. It's not only not terrible, you know, like, as Nostalgia Chick put it, in order of least awful to most awful, Tank Girl, which I've only seen reviews of, Elektra, Barbed Wire, Supergirl, which I've only seen reviews of, and Catwoman. It's been a while since I watched the three of those that I did watch. I remember them all too well. I really don't feel the need to rewatch them anytime soon. Now, to get into why it's great. First, briefly, 3D. And all I really have to say on this is it's not particularly good. I hardly noticed it at all, and you should probably just, unless you just need to watch every movie in 3D that is in 3D at all, yeah, just don't bother. I think there's one time where, like, an Amazon threw a spear or something, and it looked almost like it would leave the edge of the screen and, you know, fly out into the theater itself. I think that was it. There's not that much depth to anything. There's not, yeah, I don't know, but I would imagine it's a post-conversion. Now, notes taken while watching. Now, the movie is 2 hours and 12 minutes, not counting the end credits, and I was told by one of the, you know, one of the people working at the theater, that there were no post or mid-credit scenes, so I left not long to the credits, and yeah, I feel like the thing that might have been the post-credit scene was actually instead just the last scene, and the movie would have felt incomplete if that hadn't been the last scene, if it had been a post-credit scene. Now, almost immediately, and I'm not sure I saw this in the trailers, but almost immediately in the film, you actually see that the Amazons are not all white. there are black Amazons, and there are, when you get to the World War One setting, one of the, I forget what they, I'm just going to go with commandos. One of the commandos that work with Steve, one of them is a Muslim guy, and another is a Native American. So, yeah, kudos on representation. And basically, we're told the backstory very early on, maybe the first 20 minutes or something. Basically, after, the humanity are like, quick to violence, and like they're chaotic, and thus the gods created the Amazons to try to quell that. And for a while that worked out, but then Ares tried to cause trouble. And that's also a thing, I wasn't sure if that was going to be the case. You're told about Ares almost immediately, and he is brought up throughout the film. The reason Diana leaves Themyscira is not to go fight a war, it's to go kill Ares, specifically. She states a number of times, when I kill Ares, humanity will stop fighting, because that's what she's been taught. And that, again, that's where we get the idealism. It's that simple. There's this one individual who's causing all the, and it is this kind of this sweet romantic notion that it's about one individual, one individual that has to be found and stopped, or one individual that you find and fall in love with or such. But and yeah, that's why she doesn't leave Themyscira, because she thinks that humanity, it's specifically to stop Ares, because the Amazons are the only ones who can. So yeah, and yeah, Ares causes war, and there's a fight between gods, Amazons, and Ares, and Ares might be dead, but yeah, Diana realizes this sounds like Ares is trying to, yeah, that World War One is in part his fault, or rather, Diana feels it's entirely Ares' fault. And that basically covers that. Now, when Diana is a child, she's forbidden from training, but she sneaks off at night, basically, and yeah, trains. And at first, she's running off, and then you see her come face to face with General Antiope, I want to say is her name. And there's like a second there where you think, oh no, she's gonna like yell at her, she's gonna tell her to go back, and she's gonna tell her mom that she left. Nope, they start training, because Antiope genuinely thinks, yeah. And there's this really great bit where, the Queen Hippolyta, Diana's mother, tells her, when Diana's a child, she tells her this entire story where, man was unruly, and the Amazons came in to try to calm things down. Ares created war, and Hippolyta tells Diana this story. She literally says, this is why fighting is a bad thing. Then I'm going to explain to you a thing where the fighting was a bad thing to do, to try to discourage you from learning how to fight. And once she's told the story, as I've just related to you, Diana says, so Ares is the one we have to stop. She, the mother, and it's such a it's such realistic writing for this kind of, if a child is determined to get into some kind of conflict, it's really difficult to talk them out of it. And yeah, she knows that her mother is trying to tell her why. Her mother straight up said, "This is what you should take away from this," but that's not what she does take away from it. And it's not. She is listening to her mother. She just doesn't. She doesn't completely accept what her mother tells her, and that's such realistic writing. And it actually, I mean, they have, there's not really with Bruce Wayne in the DCU so far, but then hasn't really been scenes like that. But yeah, with Clark as a child, they had scenes like that where parents say one thing and he kind of wants another, and it just did not resonate anywhere near the way this did. I hate talking about child actors who are less than amazing, because they're a child. They don't. You can't expect a small child to be a great actor. But I'm sorry, this child actor is really not particularly good, and it does harm it damages and lessens the impact of these otherwise really great scenes. And a lot of these origin stories don't have a lot of action, especially early on. This one, though they're not necessarily the most necessary and important scenes for plot, they do help establish character and such. There are these fight scenes on Themyscira very early on. You briefly see the training of Diana, some as a child, some as a teenager, and then once she's Gal Gadot's age, yeah, you have an entire action scene of a few minutes at least, where she is fighting a bunch of other Amazons. And I mean, it's essentially a training scene. It's not, but it works. It shows it. There's so much character there, and excuse me, it's the first time you see something that's consistent throughout the action scenes. She is not flawless. She is not some perfect being who never makes a mistake. She can be really rash, and yeah, sometimes she doesn't completely think through a thing she does to defeat someone or the like. And yeah, sometimes that has unintended consequences, and she's not some kind of, and that's another thing where there's this event that's it's shocking, maybe especially to Diana herself, this thing that happens very early on, and it doesn't make her this broody, angsty. No, she's clearly upset, but it doesn't send her into some spiral of self-doubt. And so, and I really appreciated that. She's allowed to feel bad about something that went wrong without it just completely taking over for a while. And yeah, it's greatly appreciated. But yeah, there are definitely chunks of the film do go by with very little action. And we see there is an actual barrier between the two worlds, and basically when you get really close to Themyscira, before you cross the border, it's this really foggy and dark and dreary kind of, and that's, I guess, basically what they have as defense. Once because a sailor is going to see that and think, oh, I'm not going that way. This is, wait, I can't navigate in this. And they turn around, and that's worked for them. Yeah, that's it. In World War I, people were sent into, not out into the sea but they did go places where, I mean, there's a reason they call it no man's land. This is not something where if you're just courageous enough, it'll work out. No, this is something that you won't survive, but your superiors are still going to tell you to do it. So, yeah, it shows that the world of Themyscira had not been vigilant to how war grew and how cruel war had gotten. So they expected that to still work out, rather than, sending someone out to patrol the barrier. Although they would have to be on the human side of the barrier, because you can't see across the barrier. And that's, again, a cool little detail. Now, something that's also quite consistent in this, excuse me, is that the battle is not, it's unpleasant, it's ugly, people die, and that means that a person that you knew, that you took for granted as being alive, is no longer alive, and there's no undoing that. And that's what happens, even if you fight well, even if you think you're prepared, even if the battle seems to be going well. And I really greatly appreciate that. This is, when I reviewed Logan, I talked about how in that movie, the action was in part supposed to be like movies like Unforgiven, and Unforgiven is not an action movie, and it's never, I mean, if you sit down to that and either before or after you think, oh, that's an action movie, you completely misunderstood the movie, or didn't know what you were going to be watching. But here it actually manages to, I mean, it can look really cool, but fundamentally in every battle in this, it is this, it's a means to an end without it ever being, it doesn't feel like what you're watching is just, it manages to make it, for the characters, something that just needs to be done, whilst to the audience delivering something that, it's what we want to see. And again, like the first Thor movie, like the first Captain America movie, well, not less so the first Captain America movie, but Thor, very early on, you get to see the titular character use their amazing powers to great effect, and that's what we want to see. That's why we pay for the ticket. And there's a lot of that in this movie. There's a lot of Wonder Woman using her powers. Again, chunks of the film do pass with very little action, but when there's action, it's not just 2 seconds. It's several minutes, and it's really cool stuff. And she does a lot of, I mean, at the end of the day, she doesn't have that many. She doesn't have a huge array of very different powers. She's extremely fast, strong, and then she's got these couple of weapons. But that's more or less, and equipment, the bracers and such. But that's essentially it. But they managed to keep coming up with slightly different things to do. No two action scenes feel the same, or just do exactly the same thing. And this is, this is a problem that I had with Man of Steel. The climax has just, over and over, just fighting between Kryptonians. And it's like, okay, we get it. These people can do, really. If you wanted that much fighting between Kryptonians, at least some of it should have been sooner in the film. And, yeah, the fall of Krypton itself, but still, it just, yeah, anyway, it's never just this, it's never just cool. How, and that's something that Diana realizes almost immediately once she really starts fighting. Yeah, really bad things happen in battle. Some of the acting by the Amazons, maybe, I hate to say it, but honestly, most of it, except for Hippolyta and adult Diana, and some of General Antiope's, most of it's just bad, and it's terrible. I really hate to say it, but it is terrible acting, and I think they did the thing where they worried a lot about the physicality of the performers, so they hired stuntmen and martial artists and such, and it just, yeah, they have the physicality, but then the acting, it's a huge problem that very few films manage to solve well, because you don't often find, I mean, both Bruce Lee and Brandon Lee were actually really charming and could act in addition to fighting. But yeah, the majority of these, people who focus a lot on the physical performance are often just not as good actors. You might say that either you focus on, I'm not calling them stupid. I just want to make that clear. But yeah, you focus on perfecting your body or perfecting your craft, and I don't know, I guess, honestly, I think if they had just either had, yeah, I think the best solution would have been that when you need people who can act, just have actual actors, but just, if they're not in as good shape, then film so that you don't notice that, or just, because you didn't really need them to be the same people as, you obviously you can't do it with Diana herself. It's actually Gal Gadot doing all these stunts. She probably had a stunt double for some of it, but a lot of this stuff, and yeah, but and I've already mentioned Ares. The other villains are, so I'm not going to give away exactly who Ares is. I'll just say that you do get to meet him, but there are these other villains who, it seems like Ares is probably parading around as one of them and just, yeah, fanning the flames. But you're told about Ares, and you see him in this kind of flashback, and you meet the General Ludendorff and Dr. Poison. I'll get more into them. Now, when we first meet Steve, he tells us about what he did, why he crashed the plane, and basically he was there to observe and, yeah, just not get involved. But he saw Dr. Poison do this, really work with this poison stuff, poison gas, and he felt compelled to act. And just, Steve is a really good counter-argument to all these morons who are calling the movie anti-men, or saying that it's making women out to always be better than men. Steve is he's not a flawless individual, but then no one in the movie is. He is very driven, and he clearly does care about what's right, and just, yeah, that's also, there are men in this movie who look at Diana Prince and see a woman and think, well, she obviously can't be as good as the men. Steve never does that. When she rescues him, he's not like, ugh, a woman? Come on, there's got to be a guy around here somewhere that was the person who actually saved me. No, through and through, he actually responds to her passion, her skill. He doesn't see a woman who happens to be, he sees a person who is an amazing person. And there at the start, Steve actually has the notebook from the general, which needs to be, he needs to get it to the spy headquarters in London. And that's where, and Diana tags along for that, so that after that they can go and stop the, yeah. There's this scene where, basically, yeah, with Steve on Themyscira, he's in this like hot springs bath kind of thing, jacuzzi, and like he's getting out of the bath, and then Diana walks in, and she's never seen a man before, and she doesn't knock because, whoa, there's nothing that, she's not used to there being something that she shouldn't be seeing or something, so yeah, she just walks in, and yeah, it's played for comedy, and at first he's like trying to cover up, and then he just kind of stands comfortably, and she's like, are you a typical example of your sex? And he's like, well, I'm above average. And she's like, what is that? He's like, well, that is, oh, and she's actually talking about this watch that, watch that he got from his father, who hid this uncomfortable hunk of metal up his ass. And very early on, Steve expresses he wants to stop the war. He's not, and again, that's somewhat like the Captain America 1 thing, but you kind of have to, and Diana as well. Steve Rogers said, I don't want to kill anyone, I just don't like bullies. And here, yeah, both Diana and Steve are like, this is not right, we shouldn't be fighting. They're not saying we have to make sure this particular country wins. They're just saying people are dying, this is awful, and we have to stop it. And that again is, that's kind of the outside perspective. It's the logical and obvious thing, but so many people during that did just focus on, we have to win, And I was wondering when, as Diana is leaving, because she leaves without permission, I was wondering if they were maybe gonna send, some Amazons to the world of man to try to get her, back. But actually, when Diana and Steve are about to leave by boat, Hippolyta and a few other Amazons ride up, and again, this so easily could have been a terrible scene. It could so easily have been this stupid, like, just with the younger character defiant, and just, again, I really wanted Man of Steel to get this right, and it didn't really, it wasn't that compelling in that movie. But here, yeah, at the end of the day, the movie, so easily they could have had just Diana like spot her mother and immediately turn, get into the boat and sail off or something, or it could have had her like try to surrender and her mother just immediately say, no, you're right, you should go. And there are so many ways this scene could have been completely screwed up, but instead it goes the way it should. Diana walks up and she says, I understand why you want me to stay, but I can't. I have to do this. And Hippolyta understands because she can't control, that's something that every parent comes to realize. You can't control your kids. Ultimately, you have to just try to prepare them for the world and then hope that things go and try to help them, but you cannot control them. At some point, they will need to break out of the, and yeah, and Hippolyta, and again, they could have had Hippolyta say, "You're wrong. Stay here," and Diana just walk away. But instead, Hippolyta says, "They don't deserve you, and if you leave, you may never return." To which Diana responds, "What will I be if I stay?" And Hippolyta accepts it because, yeah, it's time. It's that she's leaving the nest and she's gonna and hopefully she will be able to fly. There's this when they're on the boat, they Diana and Steve have these conversations about the differences between their two worlds, and one of the things is this. Basically, she's they're talking about, like, okay, he's getting, okay, here's, Diana, you can sleep here, or you can stay. I'm just gonna stay over here. There's plenty of room right here. No, yeah, but it's just, do men not sleep with women where you come from? No, I don't sleep with women. I mean, we sleep with women, but and it's just, it's this thing about, like, expectation of that, and just at the end of the day, ultimately he does agree and just lie there next to her, and they talk. And it's just, if it had been directed by a guy, there's a real chance that it would have ended with this kind of James Bondy. He seduces her and she thinks he's amazing at sex or something. But instead, they lie there and talk because they don't have to get physical just because they could, and just because they're attracted to each other. They also want to know about the other's world because both of them have never had this opportunity before. And Steve didn't even know that Themyscira existed. She's known that the world of man existed, but she never thought she'd actually get to, interact directly with someone. Certainly didn't expect it to be, now. But yeah, they talk, and it's a really great scene. I'm not gonna lie, some of the jokes are really cheesy, and I can imagine people watching this whole thing and never laughing, and I don't really... They're not wrong, basically. I laughed, but definitely there's some cheesy and corny and forced jokes. A lot of it, if or when it works, it's because of the delivery of Gal Gadot, Chris Pine, and I forget her name, but the actress who plays Etta Candy, for example. The material itself is often just not all that good, and it's really unfortunate. It would have been a completely different movie if they actually tried to remove all the jokes or change them a lot. And yeah, it's unfortunate that they're that cheesy. And among other things, when Diana, she's walking the streets of London, and basically she gets catcalled, and there's this thing of, like, she notices that a guy and a girl are holding hands, And she's like, why are they holding hands? Oh, because they're together. And she's like, oh, I want to hold your hand. No, 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 we're not together. We're not together like that. And, basically, the value systems clash. The outlook on the two genders and such of Diana and of the world of man. And I greatly appreciated this movie. Could so easily, there's stuff in, I mentioned the other movies, like, this is also something Nostalgia Chick pointed out, and Elektra's like, a woman? What? They couldn't, no. And, Barbed Wire has Don't Call Me Babe, and Catwoman has Male Academia. The movie could so easily have just kept hammering home this, but see how intolerant men are of women, and it really doesn't come up all that much. Basically, the it's, Diana walks into places where they only expect men to be, and she speaks her mind, and they don't accept her, what she says, what she argues for, they don't accept. And, and it's not just that she's a woman. Steve Trevor tries to argue it as well, but basically it needs to be there because it explains why it's just Steve, Diana, and then these other three guys who are going there, why they don't get a lot of, like, soldiers to come with them or something, because plain and simple, Steve talked to the guys in command, and they said no. It's completely unsanctioned of a mission, and it needed to be. It would have been a completely different movie if they were working directly with the military. So, yeah, you needed to have that scene there, and I mean, essentially, you didn't need to have Diana in the scenes. It could have just been Steve arguing this and such, but you do want to have her. It's important for her growth to see these men being callous about World War One, which the leaders were. That's otherwise the war would have ended much sooner. It was because they kept saying, no, I don't care about the mustard gas and the machine guns and no man's land. Go, keep moving, push on. And, basically, Dr. Poison and General Ludendorff are trying to make an even more powerful gas. And there's this bit where, the code book is written in, like, these two languages that make it a really impressive code. And they're like, I don't know if we can, how are we supposed to read this? And Diane takes one quick look and is like, oh yeah, it's a mix of these two languages, because she's extremely educated. This is told very early on. One of the first things Steve says is like, why are you so good at English? I speak hundreds of languages. It's not, no, dude, you're not that special. It's just, you speak English, and it's one of the many, many languages that I know. That's all. And that also is a cute little thing of, if they're really these ancient Greeks, would they really be able to speak comfortably with modern man? And it's the Star Trek thing of, no, we can speak any language that they speak. One of the three guys on the three commandos is played by Spud from Trainspotting. I don't know when Gal Gadot learned to speak English, and I don't know if this is an all thing, or maybe it's a directing thing, or I don't know, but there are definitely times in her performance where it feels like she's having a little trouble completely comfortably speaking English, saying the lines, so that the acting comes after just trying to. This is the same thing you see in a lot of Arnold Schwarzenegger performances and like Jean-Claude Van Damme. It's just they've memorized the line, but they still have to kind of it's just to pronounce it right and say it with a flow. It just so the acting, you know, it's difficult to act if you don't know if what you're saying isn't flowing very fluidly from your lips. And yeah, that's I feel like that's sometimes, again, maybe it's a different thing, but there was definitely something here. But I'm not sure I'd really say that her performance was ever actually bad. There are times in it where it could be better, and on the whole, it's good. But yeah, I don't think it's ever bad. And she actually, because she speaks so many languages, one of the Muslim guy is actually also like a linguist, and so they have a language duel basically, which is quite fun. The Amazons will toss their sword, and they'll toss the shield, like Captain America will, but theirs isn't a frisbee, as Ultron put it. And Steve at times alludes to that he's done stuff he wasn't proud of, and that's he's a spy. That's often the case. There's this really great, and apparently it's like from the New 52, the first time Diana has an ice cream cone, and basically, like, she's entering London, and she's offered one by a street vendor, and she's like, oh yeah, so, sounds good, and Steve pays for it, and she tastes it, and she's like, this is wonderful. You should be very proud. And it's this really sweet moment, and that again is, she says some things that are very insulting and brash and honest, but then she's also this, yeah, when she thinks something is good, she says that. And I think the General and Dr. Poison at times are a little too, like, cartoony. There's this bit where I'm not going to give away the exact circumstances, but they throw this bit of, this gas grenade into a room full of people, and the General also throws in a gas mask. And we, the audience, already know. We saw in an earlier scene, the gas goes through the gas mask. It's not going to. And she says to him, but the mask isn't going to work. And he's like, but they don't know that. And then they both laugh, and I know that's a thing villains do, but it really felt forced here. It and the climactic fight feel like studio notes. Like, this is not enough of a comic book movie. Make it more of a comic book movie. And she also has this kind of awkward, I don't know if it's like, I haven't heard her say that much, the actress, so maybe it's just that's what it sounds like when she laughs, but it's this kind of, excuse me, kind of throaty, deep-voiced laugh, and I don't have any problem with that. It just feels a little off. It takes some away from the, yeah. I'm going to talk more about the crossing the no man's land. Something I thought was very worth noting is she's not doing that just to go beat up some people. She's doing that specifically to save people. And that really is so much of the time when Diana goes and actually fights people. It's specifically to save people. It's not so much that these guys have to be beat up. It's that if I do beat up these guys, I'll be able to save these other people. And that's it. There's no meaningless violence. She wants to fight, but not because she wants to beat people up. She wants to fight because it's a way to help people. And she realizes that you shouldn't always fight. And actually, when she crosses no man's land, and this is again a really vital thing, she wouldn't have made it if not for Steve and the other commandos helping out. And she doesn't enter it, fully knowing. She doesn't say, okay, cover my back. She just runs in. And yeah, it's this kind of youthful enthusiasm and kind of throwing yourself headfirst into something without necessarily being completely having thought through what's going to happen. And yeah, it's and that actually there really isn't an action scene that involves both Diana and Steve wherein he doesn't do something really important and something that she couldn't have done. And it, again, this is not about one person, it's not about one gender, it's about coming together to save people. And man, that is, it shouldn't be, but it is really refreshing in comic book movies today to actually have that, especially in a series of films, film franchise that so far has just been obsessed with, no, it's okay, it's okay, not that many people are dying because of the good guys. And actually also, you genuinely feel like Diana might die in the end. I've seen people say, oh, there's no sense of danger. I have no... What movie did you watch? There's all the time this sense of danger and threat. She's superhuman, but she's not invulnerable. If she's not fast enough to deflect the bullets, and that again, that's such an important thing, and that's established very early on. One of the first scenes, we actually see a bullet from a gun, not special bullet, just a bullet fired from a gun hits an Amazon, and yeah, it kills her because they're not, their skin doesn't deflect bullets or something. No, they're not unkillable. And every single time someone fires a gun near Diana, you have that realization. And yeah, it does a ton. And it's far too rare in comic book movies today to feel a sense of threat towards the good guy. And there's this, very early on, some of the Amazons do this thing where they launch one of them by, one of them jumps onto a shield. It's basically the fastball special, Avengers style from the first Avengers movie. And then later again, Steve sees that happen, and then later again, he has Diana do it, and it's, yeah, they work really well together in fights and such. And, when a fight is over, you're not like cheering, look at, did you see how many people she managed to take out? You're cheering because of all the people she saved because of the fight. It would feel so hollow, all this fighting, if she wasn't directly saving people. And there's this, one of the commandos straight out says, I didn't want to be a soldier, but I didn't have any other choice. There's this bit where Diana is given a beer, and I was hoping that we'd get to see her react to her very first beer or such, but yeah, unfortunately not. But it really is one of the only times where she isn't reacting to, yeah. And there's this, of course, bit where the two of them dance, and the literal, Steve is like, no, it's okay, I'll show you how to dance. And they start dancing, and she's like, you're very close to me. And he's like, that's the idea. And again, this is where the movie could easily just collapse into, oh, just together, but no, it feels earned. It actually, yeah. And Gal Gadot really has a radiant smile. You genuinely believe, and it's so hugely different, her performance in this, from the Batman v Superman performance, which was also a good performance, but it was fairly flattened. And, here she is young, she's really enthusiastic and cheery and happy and passionate. And there's this bit where it basically, one of the commandos, he was there to do a specific thing, and then it turns out he doesn't do that specific thing when they really needed him to. And like the next time they're like, breaking up camp and about to leave, he's like, I guess you don't really want me to come, do you? Because he thinks, I mean, this was the thing that I was supposed to contribute. I was supposed to do this thing as a soldier, and I can't do it, so I'm not useful as a soldier anymore. And Diana had actually, when he first fails to do it, she doesn't say it to him, and she doesn't say it so that he could hear it, but she's like, but he was here to do that thing, why couldn't he do it? And another character is like, well, and she kind of understands. And so when he says, you don't really want me to come, and he's giving them an out. He's saying, I accept that I shouldn't come. We don't have to sit down and have a one-on-one. I get it. I'm not useful anymore. And she's like, no, of course not. And it's actually this sweet thing where they did a really good thing, and he's happy, so he's singing. And another character's like, I haven't heard him sing in years. And so, yeah, when they're like, oh, you don't really want me, she's like, no, don't be crazy. Who would sing? And it's so sweet. And then they, of course, have to go and make a joke out of it, which it works. And there's this, basically, he's like, sing, eh? And, it cuts to a later scene, and he's like still singing. And just, yeah, Diana, he'll be singing for hours. And you don't get to know the commandos as much as the main characters, but I will say I'll remember them for longer than the Captain America 1 commandos. And through them we also get more about talking about how women are treated at at this point in time. And actually the women in from this time tend to be mainly comic relief. You have Etta Candy, and there's this woman who's like going to a party, and Diana sees her, and she's like looking up and down, and she's basically like thinking, could I wear that dress? And then smash cut, and she's wearing it. So yeah. And there's this bit where like Steve tries to convince Dr. Poison, as a spy. She thinks that he's a German officer, so yeah, he's trying to talk her into betraying General Ludendorff. And I'm not going to give away how that scene really goes, but yeah, he's basically trying to be, trying to make it seem like they're almost soulmates. And yeah, I do think that Dr. Poison got to be at least a little bit more interesting than I thought from the trailers, but it's still, the villains are terribly underdone in this. That's, when I say terribly underdone, they're fine villains. It's just that you're not going to walk away thinking, man, those were amazing villains. They're not. It's not a huge problem. And again, the movie actually has villains from start to finish, which is a huge problem in a lot of these origin stories. You know, Iron Man 1, the villain is only there for the very last little bit of the movie. Then you have something like X-Men First Class, where the villain is apparently inactive for a ton of the movie because, oh, we need the good guys to go out and recruit and train a team. And here it actually feels like it makes sense. The you know, between the first and the last time you see them, they get better and better at this gas attack thing. Things happen, you know, they're slowed down by losing the notebook to Steve. And the movie also really shows how relentless war is. You know, how so quickly people die so suddenly. And Diana actually really doesn't fight, much less kill, very many other characters, you know, very many, you know, faceless goons, or anyone, until maybe, you know, right around the climax she does, you know, some more, but still not that many. And it's not like, it's not a budget thing, because the actual climax is pretty big and looks really good, although it's, yeah, it has a lot of the BVS climax going. And yeah, again, like I said, it feels like a studio note, but it's still, I mean, it's not a chore to sit through like most of BVS is. It's, yeah, there's no part of this movie that where you're just sitting like tapping your foot and like, okay, can we move on? It's just that the climax is where it really gives where it really puts on what you would expect from a lot of it for being a big blockbuster based on a comic. You know, that's, yeah. And I can understand if you sit there and you're frustrated at how much of the movie isn't like that, but the action undeniably is really great. And there could be more of it, but there's not that little. There's, again, maybe especially for an origin story, there's a pretty decent amount of it. It's basically, a lot of the middle doesn't have a lot of action. The very start has some action, and the climax is fairly, you know, big, and you know, several action scenes in a row. But yeah, and the theme song is used really well. It's a moment that really has you cheer. And yeah, I was a little worried about how that was gonna go, but yeah. And let's see. Ares' identity, or human identity, is revealed at the end, and it really feels like a twist for the sake of a twist. It did not need to be secret at all. And Dr. Poison does not have a lot of screen time, and is really just, yeah, she's, you know, she doesn't reach her full potential. None of the villains do. Ares doesn't look like Ares for all that much of the film, but he does get there, and he does stay there for at least a few minutes. So again, I really appreciate that. It's too bad that we don't get to see him much like that, but we do get to see him like that. They don't, you know, this is not Fantastic Four, the second Fantastic Four movie, and it's not Green Lantern, where, you know, the bad guy just, yeah. No, they actually used the way he looks in the comics. And the very final fight is quite cool. Diana and Steve and maybe a few others are really the only characters who are used to their full potential, and yeah, that's too bad. An example, Iron Man 1, a character like Obadiah Stane is used to his full potential, I would say, and yeah, that aspect of that movie is stronger because of that. Yeah. And let's see. Excuse me. Now the Amazons are a lot like the ancient Greeks in armor, weapons. They ride horses. And those were the notes. So moving on to plot. Now, I have not watched anything by Patty Jenkins other than Monster, and I am going to go at least a little bit into Monster. It's the film we know Patty Jenkins for. It's got to be at least part of why they chose her and why she wanted the job. Monster is a brutal film, hard to watch, makes you sympathize with someone you'd never expect to. It's intense, tense, paced well. It has small patches of sweetness and humor, and its protagonist doesn't believe people can really be good because, based on her experiences with all kinds of people, all of them judging her for her place in society, which doesn't garner her much respect or even basic human decency. She does love one person and believe her to be a good person, but she considers her the exception. One major difference between the two films is that Diana is driven by an urge to do good rather than Eileen, who feels pushed into something she deep down knows is bad. But yeah, the sweetness and humor is more frequent, and it is more the you might say if the whole of Monster was set some years before, when it's actually set back when she was more of a dreamer, yeah, Diana is almost where Eileen would have been in that. So clearly, Jenkins is she likes female characters who do have this optimism and enthusiasm, this idea of that the world is good, and you will, yeah, and that goodness is pervasive, hopefulness. And that's also something that's, very true of Shelby. She could very easily just completely give up, but she's also being rejected by a lot of society just for being who she is. Now, Themyscira is an all-female Amazonian island. The idea is that women can be strong independently of men, not that women are superior to men, or that all men are weak and need women in order to function and or be good people. Far too much fiction has taken the exact opposite gender representation. For a while, female empowerment fiction then reversed that, and this rises above that like a lot of her comics do. Like I said, Steve is a very good person. There are things where he could be a better person, and there are things where he makes mistakes, but there's no character in the whole movie that doesn't make any mistakes. And, if you say that this film makes men look like idiots and women look great, to an extent, so do the first 3 films of the DCU. It's just that this one is actually trying to make the gender it focuses on look good. Rather than, not managing it excellently, And if you as a viewer can't handle that this film empowers women after 3 films in a row of the DCU that celebrate hypermasculinity, And, Hippolyta says, fighting does not make you a hero. And Patty Jenkins stands for the importance of bringing a hero who can love and forgive to the big screen. And, excellent decision, and it really pays off. And, it's a big-hearted, emotional story. And it's the first female-dominant superhero film in 12 years, since Elektra. About time, and the MCU is still only getting to theirs in spite of starting their cinematic universe in 2008 and having their first major female superhero in 2010. And now, there are times where Diana, agrees to be in a sort of flirtatious or the like, kind of, maybe somewhat sexualizes herself. But her sexuality is never in the control of someone else, and it doesn't feel like she should have to be sexual. Now, unlike Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Suicide Squad, and other recent non-DCU comic adaptations, Wonder Woman does not ignore her enemies' basic human rights. She doesn't brutalize them like in the TV pilot. It's not the ends justify the means, the awful acts questioned but always vindicated. It was the right thing to do. And there's not a huge amount of collateral damage. It's not macho and afraid to show anything less than hypermasculinity from the characters we're supposed to root for. Not 9/11 and or disaster porn. I know some people say that it doesn't respect, it takes advantage of the setting of World War I and all the horrors of it. I completely disagree. It tries to examine them instead and say, does World War I mean that humanity is evil or mainly evil? And, at times you have the muted colors of the DCU, but then Themyscira is very bright. Our hero isn't damaged and brooding. It's not the permanent serious tone of DCU, but again, it's almost too comedic at times. You know, I forget if it's Patty Jenkins herself who said it, but someone pointed out, you know, at times the movie is a romantic comedy, and yeah, at times maybe too much so, and or the jokes just aren't quite good enough for that to, yeah. I have no problem with romantic comedies. There are a few of them that I absolutely love. Now, it doesn't especially have DCU cameos and links. At the very start, you know, Diana in present day receives the original photo that, you know, the digital file was on Lex's computer in Batman v Superman, and, you know, her looking at the original photo is, you know, that makes her flash back, and the rest of the film is basically what happened back then, you know, in World War One. And then actually, it jumps further back than that. It jumps to her childhood first. And, you know, yeah, it explains why she turned her back on men, why she sat out the Holocaust, but that's still, yeah, that was a really bad decision. One of Zack Snyder's many, many bad decisions, but it actually does manage to get some pathos out of that. And yeah, I already mentioned that the theme song is used well, not as awkwardly and overbearing as Batman v Superman. Freaking Snyder's use of music. Now, some common origin story movie issues and whether or not this one faces them. You know, the two little villain presence thing isn't really a problem here. It's more that they don't get to do that much. Every time we see them, they're basically just cackling and talking about how evil they are and why their gas isn't quite awful enough yet. And yeah. But yeah, they don't just appear at the very end, or, you know, you could say that the characters that we were following, the villains, are then replaced by the true villain, which, yeah, happens in these. Now, too much exposition. At the very start, there is maybe a little too much just over and over being told about the world of the Amazons, though some of it is also by showing it, but it could definitely be, yeah. Now, it does not do the Batman Begins thing where, you know, she gradually pieces together her costume and her equipment and such. Now, and the climax does not make up an hour in the second half of the film, and is almost the only place that has action and characters actually smile and show emotion. And it's not over serious and heavy all the time like the DCEU. Now, the fight between the soldiers and the warriors of Themyscira on Themyscira does happen quite early on, and it's a good, it shows the collision between the world of man and the world of Themyscira, and yeah, it's very effective. I was a little worried that it was going to be contrived and just like a way to put in action where there shouldn't be any. On the contrary, it's a very important scene. And moving on to characters. Now, Gal Gadot, this is the only role I've seen her in. She is in 4 of the 8 Fast and Furious films, movies 4 through 7, and she considers that an empowering female character and is very proud. A lot of people say she's the right choice for Wonder Woman, not tall enough, too skinny, not muscly enough, not capable of projecting that level of strength, force, authority, too pretty. And, you know, she does have 2 years of military experience. I personally I wasn't sure about it in Batman v Superman. Watching that movie, I wasn't sure if she was the right choice. Now I would definitely say she is. It's hard to imagine anybody else embodying the role the way as well as she does, especially this version of it, who is so happy and just there's it's almost like it's not childish, it's innocent. She's innocent. And yeah, Gadot described her character as having many strengths and powers, but at the end of the day, she's a woman with a lot of emotional intelligence, and that statement tells me that she and the film really get the character, and yeah, they absolutely do. And Gadot plays it very earnestly, and some have compared her to Christopher Reeves as Superman, and yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, at this point in her life, she's almost too honest, direct, saying things that will insult and such. But she's not like a fool. It's just that she doesn't fit in the world of man. And Steve takes it really well, trying to be polite, very wry and deadpan. And this setup leads to a lot of comic relief. She's a fish out of water. She doesn't know the world of man yet. But yeah, Paragon of the Amazons, champion of her people. And yeah, Gadot herself said that, yeah, she's more naive. She's a young idealist. She's pure. Very different to the experienced, super confident, grown-up woman you've seen. And let's see. Yeah, from the wiki on the comic character, as a compassionate warrior with godlike strength, she preferred peace and love to war and violence. And in the 50s and 60s, comic writers would make her lovesick over Steve Trevor, and yeah, stories would have her hoping or imagining what it would be like to marry Steve Trevor. I was hoping that some of that would be parodied or satirized, like how Captain America 1 parodies and satirizes his propaganda origins, and yeah, Steve introduces her as his secretary, and the first time she's told what a secretary is or does, she says, "Where I come from, we call that slavery." And yeah, Steve is rescued by Diana, not the other way around. And yeah, she's clearly the stronger one, and Steve is tied up with the lasso at least once. And yeah, there's this exchange where Steve says, "I can't let you do that," and her response is, "What I do is not up to you." It's assertive, not bossy. She's not rubbing her ovaries in his face. It's not try wearing a corset. It doesn't ignore that he does mean it in a good way. She's not telling him that he's wrong to care, only that it isn't his decision to make, that he's being possessive, that she can handle herself. And yeah, Chris Pine as Steve Trevor. And yeah, he described his character as roguish, cynical realist who's seen the awful, brutish nature of modern civilization. Worldly guy, charming guy. And yeah, I haven't seen him in much, but he is really charming. And Gal and Chris are really great together in this, like Robert Downey Jr. and Gwyneth Paltrow, Chris Hemsworth and Natalie Portman, Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone. In their better moments, monsters Charlize Theron and Christina Ricci, and entirely unlike Chris Evans and Emily Van Camp. And sorry, as much as I love both casting choices individually, as I do for all characters mentioned, Henry Cavill and Amy Adams. And Robin Wright as General Antiope, the sister of Hippolyta and Diana's aunt, she does a really great job. She really is a general. She's very militaristic. Right away she agrees that Diana should learn to fight. And Danny Houston, yet again as a villain, always fun as villains, playing General Erich Ludendorff, an ambitious and iron-fisted general of the German army during World War One. David Thewlis as Patrick Morgan, an advocate for peace on the War Council. And the villain Ares will grow to superhuman size. Usually in the trailer, grows to superhuman size at least once in the film. And yeah, the fight between him and Diana is quite good. Now, and yeah, Connie Nielsen as Queen Hippolyta, and this mother-daughter dynamic relationship is a big part of Act 1, and as you see in the trailers, Hippolyta wants to protect Diana. When Diana's a child, she tries to talk her out of violence. That doesn't work, so when she grows older and Hippolyta realizes she will fight, she demands an Antiope, General A, to train her as hard as she can, again, to protect her. And, the woman-to-woman relationship in Monster between Eileen and Shelby was also a major element of that film. So it's, again, it's a director who realizes that female characters don't have to be, can exist independently of, they don't have to exist as related to a male character who's more important. And Elena Anaya as Dr. Maru, Dr. Poison, mad scientist who's associated with General Ludendorff and specializes in chemistry such as poisons. And really, she still just wants vengeance for her skin condition. Lucy Davis as Etta Candy, yeah, a lot of fun, and she's not ridiculous, and it's not, oh look, she's overweight, that's hilarious. No, she's upbeat, is really positive, like, she really likes working for Steve, and she cares about him. She's not made to be like less. They give her a really important role. Unfortunately, not one that means a lot of screen time, but a really important role. And at first, she's actually like, oh wow, can I do this? But she does. It doesn't say, oh look, women can't do. No, she manages. Now, yeah, and then there is Saeed Taghmaoui as Samir, a secret agent who's master of disguise, an ally of Steve Trevor. Ewan Bremer's Charlie, a heavy-drinking sharpshooter who's already had a tour of duty and is post-traumatic stress disorder, and also an ally of Steve Trevor, and I don't know why I didn't include the third one, but the third one is the smuggler. And yeah, their specialties are utilized relatively well, and again, as much as I liked the ones in Captain America, here I really felt like I'll remember these guys, and they have personalities. They're not just, oh look, we can fight and we're cool. Action and abilities. Now, as the director is known for drama, a lot of directors who go directly from that to a big budget action film have trouble handling the action, and the action, the budget, the effects, the big cast of big names, and that's not really the case here too much. I don't know exactly what, if she just sat down and like really studied intensely action films, maybe she already had, long before the movie, and she just hadn't made an action movie. That's entirely possible, but it doesn't feel like and it's not. Jon Favreau did amazing on Iron Man 1 and 2 as well. He was also a drama director, but But an example would be Mark Webb on both Amazing Spider-Man movies. The action in those movies, as much as I love those movies, you could tell that this is a drama director who hadn't really, yeah. And yeah, in this here, it really doesn't feel like it. Maybe she hired a cinematographer that really knows action. I don't know exactly, but yeah. The invisible jet is not seen. Sorry. It does not appear in this, but the lasso of truth is in it, and it works. It's used even early on. It's used on Steve Trevor when he first arrives on Themyscira to find out what's actually going on. And at times it's used for comedic effect, including on Steve Trevor. And it's also used in action scenes. She legitimately, like, she'll lasso someone or use it like a whip wrapped around a leg and trip someone and such. And she lifts the tank. And yeah, if you're not gonna have Superman do it, then yeah, Wonder Woman at least should. At least. Then Wonder Woman for sure should. And the climax doesn't really have the, yeah, something that bothered me in Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, the superhuman protagonist who's seemingly overpowered, then rising for at least one final attack to save the day. Yeah, that isn't really done here. Now, the Nerdist people, I want to say, it's Jessica Chobot specifically, said that the Lasso of Truth looked too bright and shiny in the world of man, and maybe, yeah, I get why. It's maybe a little bit too strong of a, they toned down her costumes colors, so yeah. And there's this action scene in an alley where she blocks bullets aimed for Trevor in a reversal of that scene in the 78 Superman movie on speed. And yeah, it's great. And the fights are really well choreographed. Every action scene is really well choreographed. And the big finale with, some have said, oh, it's like the Batman v Superman, Doomsday fight. There are definitely elements of it that are like that, but it's nowhere near as, like, just overpowering to the audience. And also, when it happens, it's not after a whole movie that's been really overpowering. The rest of the movie isn't all, it's not overpowering. It's dramatic and impactful. I've seen critics say that, they were misty-eyed throughout the whole film. I can totally see why. It really, right from the start, yeah, some viewers will have that experience as well. And yeah, the standout action scene of Wonder Woman running through no man's land, her shield up, and just, yeah, and it really, yeah, it's as others have noted, an emotional scene. And it's one of the scenes, Film Brain describes, that's one of the scenes that feels like a gender flip 300. And yeah, so, unlike Man of Steel, the action scenes are not too similar, and the speed ramping, connecting it visually to Snyder's DCU films, and as Film Brain also points out, it also it highlights, which it also did when Snyder did it, when Snyder does it, it highlights the level of physical strength and speed of these people. And yeah, she doesn't fight a single being as powerful as Doomsday, nor is the combined might of her enemies greater than Doomsday's. And that's the problem with putting the origin story after the team-up. Comparatively, Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America all faced stronger being in the first Avengers film than they did in their individual first films. And the Justice League trailers already out indicate that in those she will also fight something stronger than she does here. They should have put more time between the films and or held off advertising Justice League. She does pull some of the same moves that she did in Batman v Superman. And yeah, I already mentioned that she works well with the others in action scenes, in this, like in Batman v Superman. Now, the effects are not too big a part of it. They are great, but in the climax, yeah, the climax could definitely have been cut down some. And there's no scene where there's too much going on, it's hard to follow, like the war in the background of Krypton at the start of Man of Steel. Now, yeah, briefly, excuse me. Critics' pros. Note that I'm not saying it's automatically better to be a recognized critic than not. It's just to distinguish these two parts of the video. Now, I've tried to read every review already up on Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes, especially professional reviewers, and every review up on IMDb except the ones with spoilers. I did not have time to read all of them. But, yeah, last I checked earlier today, this had 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, with 222 fresh, 15 rotten, average rating of 7.6 out of 10. And, yeah, it really... I think this movie is going to save the DCU. There are a lot of people who hate it already, and there are a lot of people who are going to hate it. And they're not all... It's not only about the gender. I completely recognize that. But other than that, there are going to be a ton of people who absolutely love it. A lot of women and young girls are going to watch it and love it and be inspired by it. And yeah, it's a movie that really makes you want to see more like it. And I believe Nerdist News also were the ones who pointed out that it would be good if Patty Jenkins stayed on, maybe as an executive producer at least for the DCU. And based on what it definitely sounds like she would be interested in that. So I hope that they do let her, because yeah. And I would definitely say she can... I'm certain she can also do great things for male heroes as well. And I suppose yeah, actually, I guess that's gonna be it for the critics. So, thoughts on... There we go. Please note that this video has spoilers for the subject. Characters. Now, let's see. I feel like the three, the three villains, the General, Dr. Poison, and David Thewlis's character, I want to say the actor's name is, I feel like they could have been combined into a single character. I get if you need a character to be the human stand-in for Ares, but there didn't need to be. She says early on, oh, it must be the General. It could easily have just been the General. It didn't need to be David Thewlis. It didn't change anything. You could have removed his character and it could have just been the General. It was there because they wanted a twist, which again feels like a studio note. if you had just combined the three characters, maybe there could have been more. I do. They gave all three at least some definition. You know, I kind of sort of like the scene where Steve talks to Dr. Poison, but then ultimately it's just this thing. You know, she proves that she is, what's it called? She's not going to betray the general. And then she does the thing where she says, "Oh, clearly, you know, you have your minds on other matters." And she's like, you know, basically she's like chuckling, "Oh, look at this horny dude that's, you know, trying to come off as if he has something to offer me when I've got it made." And just, yeah, it's okay, and definitely the acting is good, but yeah, ultimately, I mean, you need a character at least there, you know, making the poison, spreading the poison, but it could easily have been a single character. And you know, I liked the various musings on, you know, Steve keeps saying this is not one entity, this is not one person's will doing all of this. And you know, I was just watching the midnight screenings, and they point out, you know, you saw her, you know, do all these superhuman things, but then you don't believe Ares. I agree that, you know, he's maybe a little too reluctant to believe in Ares at all, but I think the thing that he really objects to is it's not a single will doing this, because he understands, and she doesn't have the experience to fully grasp what's going on. It's not that she's stupid and that he's necessarily smarter, but she hasn't lived among human beings. And yeah, there's that bit where he says maybe we're all to blame. I am part of this, you know. And yeah, it really, it was compelling. And then you also have the thing with, you know, oh, but the sword was the god killer. No, you are the god killer. And it just, yeah, it didn't, again, that twist didn't really need to be there. And then, you know, he says, ah, but I'm not the god of war, I'm the god of truth. I gave them these ideas, but I didn't make them use them. And, you know, that it reminds me somewhat of the whole Lord of the Rings thing with, it's that the ring of power exists. It's that it's going to make people want to abuse the power. So yeah, the problem is in part human nature. And you know, then you have the villain arguing for, you know, genocide of human beings to, you know, rid the world of conflict, to take away problems. And it's basically, you know, and it's like, we've heard this before, they, you know, yeah, he's basically a Nazi, you know, you might say, not literally, because he's not singling out a specific group, but he's saying all of these human beings. He's saying all of humankind, not this one minority. All of them are at fault for the conflicts that they're involved in, and if we killed them, then the world would be a better place. And really, that is kind of the fundamental, you know, yeah, I'm not going to beat around the bush here, psychopathic logic behind a lot of bigotry. You know, this group is involved in conflict, so it must be their own fault. And if we could get rid of them, then the conflict that they're involved in wouldn't exist anymore. And at the end of the day, I mean, isn't that kind of the idea that's behind all conflict in general? And that, again, that's the ironic thing. He says, you know, I'm the god of truth. I'm just trying to make all these people kill each other because deep down, you know, I'm just the person who's willing to say it out loud. What? Everybody thinks like this. And at the end of the day, That's, yeah, people like that think that everybody thinks like that, and thinks that the solution is just to get rid of all these people. Whereas, and yeah, that leads to hating and fighting a group of people. You know, when neo-Nazis look at, non-whites and hate them, it's not, they're not thinking this, if I bully this group sufficiently, they will change their behavior, and then we will get along. No, they're thinking, if only I could get rid of this group. Deep down, if I could get rid of this group, or at least take away their power, then things would be better. And yeah, that's taken to its extreme in this. Similar to Loki and Thor 1, and yeah, it works really, really well. Now, the powers of Ares are a little too vague, and I've seen others point out, why is he using lightning? Shouldn't that be Zeus's thing? But then he also appears to have, like, telekinesis, and just, yeah, they could have done a better job on that. And, Steve flies off in the plane, martyrs himself, like the, Captain America one, like The Dark Knight Rises, and just, for one thing, it's like, did you really have to copy even that part of Captain America 1? And then also just, let's see. Yeah, the noble sacrifice for the sake of the noble sacrifice. Just, DCU, please get your nose out of the Dark Knight trilogy's ass. Let's see. But yeah, you kind of have this, they could have solved that without that sacrifice. I mean, we've seen that Wonder Woman is immune. Would people please stop nobly sacrificing themselves by doing something that will kill them, which Wonder Woman could very clearly, easily do? She runs right into the thick of the gas and shows no sign of being bothered. Steve just briefly enters it, and then he coughs and leaves, which is also, dude, that the tiniest little bit of, you could seriously have died from that, right? You could have just stopped and say, oh no, I can tell this is where the gas starts because it's in the, oh, but I don't smell anything. It was, so Jews can have been gassed here. No, the clearly it doesn't affect her, and just, yeah, it's just, anyway. But yeah, you've got the Return of the Jedi thing going on in the ending with, yeah, go ahead. Kill her, kill this human being who represents all the awfulness in them. I don't know if it was supposed to be funny that she then does go ahead and drop the tank on her or not. I didn't hear anybody laughing, but I could see how some might find it funny. But yeah, at the end of the day, the fight at the end, again, the climax is mindless in a lot of these films, but here they're fighting over the soul of mankind. It's hope versus despair. And, and the movie over and over goes into, will killing Ares be enough to end World War I? And I do feel like the movie almost kind of had its cake and ate it too, that they're at the end. Yeah, I guess, yeah, when she says, no, they're still fighting, that's because the person she killed wasn't Ares, really. But yeah, I do feel like it would have been, I don't know, I guess maybe it would have made the movie too long if after she killed Ares, if there was still a little bit left. Maybe I misinterpreted. Maybe that was implied. I don't know. Anyway. But yeah, there at the end, she says, only love can truly save the world. And I really wish that wasn't so cheesy, because I get it and it makes sense. And at the end of the day, I mean, no matter how cheesy and corny it is true. The only, as long as there's hate, as long as people look at others and think anything other than he is my fellow man, I don't want to hurt him. Yeah, there is going to be war and other conflicts, and at the end, and that's where Wonder Woman comes in. She gets it, and she has so much love to give, that she can actually stop, conflicts like this. And again, and that's again where, at the end of the day, yeah, it boils down to kill the bad guy. But it's when she gets there, he challenges that. He says, yeah, you can kill me, but so what? I didn't make them do this. I just gave them the means, and then they used it, thus proving that all I had to do was give them the means. And it's, yeah, she thinks that he, like, to her it's almost as if he, like, exudes conflict. As long as he's there, he's going to hurt, it's going to lead to more war. And he's like, no, they're going to wage war regardless. And at the end of the day, they look at humanity's capacity, and he thinks they're mainly evil, and she thinks they're mainly good. And in part, she's proven right by the fact that when she defeats him, when he is no longer able to spread, hatred and fear, the war does end. They stop fighting. And also that ultimately, in spite of all his power, she comes out stronger, because it's important what you're fighting for, what you believe in, when you're, yeah, when you're fighting. And at the end of the day, her belief is just the one that's, excuse me, yeah, the one that's strong, excuse me, the one that's stronger, the one that says, yeah, I think I've basically made my point at this point. And just, yeah, I do think that the movie could have been better, but I'm really happy with what we got. And yeah, I'm really hopeful for the next one. Just hopefully they won't kill the DCEU with the next several male-oriented films. Please comment, thumbs up, and subscribe for more content.